Okay, now we are ready to start. So sorry about the delay. So welcome everyone. Today we are going to have a session about the ISPA Social Protection Payments Tool. Just to have you, to give you a little bit of background, this is a tool that has been developed under the leadership of the World Bank and with the support and collaboration from the ILO, GIZ, the DFID, and also UNDP. So this tool was started to be developed in 2014. We initially did 2 field tests, one in Indonesia, one in Tanzania, and the final version of the tool was approved and made available for public use in 2016. So today we have the pleasure and the honor to have 3 very knowledgeable presenters. We have Juanita Khan. Juanita is an economist working for the World Bank in Islamabad in Pakistan. She has extensive experience working on social protection payments, not only in the design of the payment delivery mechanisms, but also in the evaluation. And also she has led an interesting work on financial inclusion and literacy for digital payments. Juanita has worked in different regions of the world, including South Asia, East Asia, and Africa. Our second presenter will be Isaku Endo, Senior Financial Specialist from the Competitiveness and Innovations in Global Practice. Isaku has been working in Indonesia more than 10 years, living and based in Indonesia in the last 3 years, but also with important experience on financial sector issues in different countries in the region, including Mongolia, Myanmar, Cambodia, and the Philippines. And Isaku had an important role in the initial field test of the tool here in Indonesia. Our last presenter is Ibu Susi Tanjung. I hope that I'm pronouncing correctly her name. She's the head of the subdirectory of the Family Social and Security Directorate, working in MOSA. And she has an important experience working in the design and implementation of the PKH program. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Juanita. I wish you a very interesting and enriching experience of learning this morning. Juanita.
Thank you, Luz, for the introduction. And it's great being here, great talking about the tool. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you, before I begin, I'd like to ask all of you to have a mic on your table and be as participative as possible. I've tried to simplify the presentation and the whole concept as much as I could. So I want all of you to be as interactive. That's the best way we'll all learn together on this. So basically, when you look at the structure of the presentation and the tool, the payments tool is basically an assessment. So it looks at the assessment of a social protection program from a financial as well as a beneficiary perspective. So the first part of the presentation is introduction to a payments assessment. The second part is unpacking the tool itself, where the indicators are from, what are the key performance criteria for the tool. And the third part is what we've learned across regions on payments assessments and how we've learned for that for our social protection program. The last part is the payments clinic, which will be after this session, where we'll basically talk about implementing a tool. So whatever you learn here will be required for your next payments clinic session. The other thing before I begin, I'd like you to also keep in mind through the presentation that tomorrow we will visit a field site where we look at payments. So when you look at this presentation, think of questions you may want to ask that site so you can further apply your knowledge. And PKH is one of the larger cash transfer programs. So it'll be interesting for you to see and apply your knowledge from today. As you can see, the icons that I've put there, there are about 3 different icons. I want you to, it's a part presentation, part checking your understanding, part discussion and dialogue. So without having all of you talk, it won't be as important, the information going through, as it should be. So coming forward to the presentation, what is a payments assessment? This is a picture of a cash transfer program in Uganda. I've put that here for perspective. Before we start the discussion on a payments tool, so Uganda is a country with the largest number of refugees, and they're all lining up to get payments. So if you don't have a structured payments approach, this is what your payment distribution will look like. So I mean, when I went there to do work on one of the programs, and we work with different programs in the bank, not just social protection, cash, I mean, not cash transfers are not just for social protection, they're also for emergency cash transfers and others. So when you see something like this, you say, there needs to be some sort of formal process to getting these people on board. So that's how a payments tool helps you. Before we begin, I'd like to ask a question to understand from all of you what you thought of payments. So this is your first question. I will need a little help. Luz, everybody has a mobile device? And you have your app on it? So this is the first question. In my cash transfer payment process, the following is the center of the payment cycle. Open your device, open your apps. No questions? Yeah, session. You need to check into the session. Nee? Okay, let me call Anna. Can you all see question 1? Yeah? Let me try. No. Get Anna, yeah. If you check in, has everybody checked in?
Everybody, one more time. Go to schedule. Check in into the first session, introduction to payment system. Check in, and then scroll down, and you will see the live poll and question. Click on question 1.
Has everybody got question 1? Number 2. Thank you, Anush. You're like our technology. Guru?
Did everybody get it? Problem?
No problem.
No, no problem.
So everybody is in. So now, Juanita, you can go.
Okay, thank you so much, Anush. You just solved our technology problem. So everybody's got the question?
Yeah.
Everybody's answered it?
Yes.
Okay. I just press enter. That's what comes.
In here, I choose payment.
This is the one. Is it this one?
If I get them to go payment
Yeah.
process, following services for the payment cycle
No, I can't change it. Which one is the one?
is important. Yeah. Are the beneficiaries?
Yeah.
If the
Thank you. So it's interesting to see. In my cash transfer payment process, the following is at the center of the payment cycle. Most of you have got it right. So when you look at a payment process and the payment cycle, the beneficiary is at the center. The payment service provider is also important. The government is also important. It's surprising that the social mobilizer has no role in this. It's like 0%. So the social mobilization is also very important, and in sometimes even more important than the government and the project, but the beneficiary is at the center. So it's good to know that everybody has their general concept right. So it's, I think I'll just go. So it's good to know that everybody has the beneficiary at the center. When we talk about payments for cash transfer programs, we talk about who. Do I need to do this back? So when we talk about payments for cash transfer beneficiaries, we need to look at a methodology to give the right amount at the right time to the right person. So that's the language we use in our payments assessment. Right time, right amount, right person means the beneficiary is at the center. The government is the facilitator. The payment service provider is the facilitator. The project staff is the facilitator. So whenever you think about a payments assessment, we all start assuming, oh my goodness, what will the banks think? How will we get the regulation in place? How will we get the project staff in place? All of those are enablers. But when you think about payments, think about how you can get cash into the beneficiary's hand in the most technology efficient manner, in the most effective, timely manner. So it's a very simple approach. When you start unpacking it from the beneficiary side, it becomes easier. I'll give you an example while this gets set up. So in my country, in Pakistan, when we start a cash transfer program, we started for the Benazir Income Support Program, which is for ultra-poor women who are over 60 because the head of the household is an old lady. And the first time we introduced technology payments, the question was, but wait, these women can't even read, write, let alone will they operate a debit card. But money is, and cash is so powerful, it makes you learn. As long as you can design it around a beneficiary, it will work. So when you think about payments, think about the beneficiary first. How will it be easiest to give them cash in the most transparent, efficient, and timely manner? Don't think about the bank, don't think about how and where you'll get it, think about the beneficiary. So that's my one takeaway, and it's possible. Because in a country like Pakistan, which has very remote areas, I mean, when looking at the PKH study, Indonesia is far ahead. And there's so many other countries which are far ahead, and they feel that, oh, it'll be very difficult to implement or to do a technology-based payment or even have a payments assessment. So if it can be done in a country which the majority is illiterate, it can always be done anywhere. So the three principles are distribution of cash, the correct amount, the right people, the right time and frequency, and minimizing costs for the beneficiary. I'll cover all of these one by one. So you have a standardized payment delivery process map. This is your process map. This is your holy grail that you need to look at when you do a payments, when you transfer payments to the beneficiaries. I had asked this, put this in as background reading material as well. So I don't want you all to understand this as of now, but this is something you keep in your mind. When you have a question that when does a payment service provider play a role, look at this map. This will come to you slowly. You don't need to understand it 100%. But if you see it, if you see A on the right, the program beneficiaries identification comes first. You can't do payments without ID. When you identify them, then you make a database. So once you make a database, that's what you use to transfer to banks, to transfer to the field, to transfer to your project staff. So these two things need to come first. Once this happens, you can mobilize your payment service provider and start paying cash. Something which I was discussing this morning with one of my colleagues also, a social mobilization plays a very important role because you will get cash to the first 50% of your beneficiaries, but the next 50% will need to understand that. And to make them understand the process, you need to also have social mobilization embedded. Now coming to payments assessment, what is a payments assessment? It's a set of practical tools to help countries improve their social protection systems by analyzing the strengths and weaknesses and offer different options for further action. So basically, when you talk about a payments assessment, it doesn't tell you that this is where I'm doing. I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4 level. It tells you a comprehensive assessment of how you can improve your system, even if it's manual, even if it's electronic. It gives you best practices and how you can improve its processes. So all of those of you who think that, oh, so an assessment is to rank me, it's not for ranking. It's to understand the best possible approach to provide payments and the most effective way to get it across. This is just to get an understanding from all of you what exactly is your payment process. So if you go to question 2 on your app, you have, in my safety net program, payments delivered to beneficiaries are primarily delivered using a manual payment system or an electronic payment system. So if everybody can open their app, I'm sure you've all checked in by now, thanks to Anush, helping us out with technology in the morning. So if you look at question 2, answer that. They'll also give you an overview of your audience and everybody else that what exactly are the payments processes that you're doing. Okay, so this is great. We have about 60% of the audience which has a digital payments approach, and about 40% have manual. So it's a very good mix. So when you guys go back for tea, have a discussion amongst yourselves as well. What have you learned as the rollover from manual to electronic? And I'm sure you'll have a lot to share amongst each other. So those of you who are in manual payments, it's like about 30% of the audience. Stop me wherever you want. There's a mic on everybody's table. I'm really participative. I have no issues if you want to stop me in the middle and ask a question. So I'll give an overview of the electronic payment system for those of you who are doing manual. So basically, why is an electronic payment system more effective? It's basically improved efficiency and timeliness of payments. The most important part in payments is their timeliness and predictability. Because the beneficiary needs to know that you will get a payment on the 3rd of every month, because they make that long trip. So that timeliness and predictability is really important. And obviously, the more automated you get, the more timely and predictable you get, which is why electronic payments helps. In Pakistan, for example, if you give money through Pakistan Post, the guy travels every time, and he will not have a regular routine. So the routine is what's important, and automation helps with that. The other part is it helps in transparency and accountability, because you have real-time information available. Obviously, there's reduced leakages and wastage of funds, because it's electronic. It's not given by hand. So something that happened, which is quite interesting, in one of the pilots that I did in Nepal, so when the guy would give money by hand, he'd keep some for himself. And because there were women taking it, and there was a man on the other side, they wouldn't argue. So there's this whole agency. When you have a debit card in your hand and you go take money out from a POS or you go take it out from a machine, you demand transparency because you think the machine has at fault. You don't demand transparency from an individual because you don't know if you have the right to ask him. So when you get a receipt or you get some sort of confirmation of your payment, you'll demand for transparency. So from a beneficiary perspective, this automation really helps in asking for the right amount. The last part is that it improves access to financial services. This is something that, as a team, we're still exploring. The first objective is to give your beneficiaries an account. Then you get them interested in the banking system. And the third part is making sure there's a product for them. So this is where the ISPA team globally is looking at examples. So if you look at Kenya, they're the leader in this. They will give you an M-Pesa account and give you a product with it. If in Pakistan, they're giving you an account only right now. You're looking at the other programs like in Myanmar, there's a pilot. Then Nepal is a pilot with biometric. So there are examples, but this is something that we're still looking at and working with the financial sector. And my colleague Isaku here, who's going to speak about the financial sector, will also talk about his experience of linking these beneficiaries to accounts. So again, question 3, what does a payments assessment look like? So we've talked with you about the payments, and we've talked about it's an operational delivery mechanism. It's looking at policy and regulations, or is it looking at both? So I want you to look at question 3 and answer that. And if any one of you is having a problem, can you let me know, and I'll come down and ask someone, or I'll help you myself. Question 3? Okay, sure. So this is amazing. I think I won't have to go through the entire presentation because you guys are already way above. So that's the point. An operational delivery of payments is just one part of the aspect. The other part is the regulatory side. So an SP project person cannot do a payments assessment on their own. You need to work with the finance and the markets team. You need to work with the banks. You need to work with the regulatory agencies to understand that if you want to give an account to a beneficiary, what is the regulation involved in it? What kind of know your customer, which is your KYC, is required to give them an account? If you go to a bank and you want to open an account, they ask you for your ID, they ask you for your number, and somebody's pointed that out, which is really interesting. So it's 0% for policy and regulation. I would expect somebody to think that's also important, but it's interesting because we're cash transfer people. And it's good to know that you think your customer is your beneficiary. But when you give your beneficiary any product, it's also important to understand the regulation involved in it. So you need to work both with the banks and the project team. So the assessment, the payments assessment, is of two parts. One is your operational cycle, understanding the beneficiaries, understanding how to provide them access. The other part is looking at the financial sector. So how does a payments assessment help improve payments delivery? This is a question that will come to all of you. Why do I need to do a payments assessment? Why will it help me? I already am doing electronic payments, or my manual cash transfer system is great. I have no leakages. All my beneficiaries are mobilized, and it's great. Why do I want to do an assessment? So an assessment basically is a midterm check. Like we have checks about our performance, it's a midterm check. So, and you can have, like Indonesia has had one assessment, they're thinking of having another one, and Pakistan had not a formal assessment, we had a formal check-in when we did a technology-based payment, and now we're doing biometrics, so we'll have another formal check-in. Nepal, we did the first biometric for payments for them, and they realized it didn't work because it was two-way advanced, so that the check-in went backwards. So it's a check to help tell you, do you want to go forward, do you want to go backward, how does your system work? So the check has one operational perspective. The operational perspective helps you understand the type of cash transfer program you have. A lot of us have a conditional cash transfer, unconditional cash transfer. What are your current and future operational needs? Are you going to expand your program? Are you going to expand your offices in local districts? If that's so, maybe your project staff can work with beneficiaries more to give them better products. What is your rural versus urban mix? If your program is expanding more in the rural area, maybe you need to change the way you're doing payments. Maybe manual might be better even. Maybe there are no banks there. So it's an assessment to give you a check. What kind of budget do you need? Maybe when you started off electronic payments, like when we did electronic payments in Uganda, we started out with a very high service charge because that was the first time you're giving electronic payments. 2 years down the lane, maybe you want to come back and see, is it better to renegotiate rates with your payment service provider? And to be able to renegotiate, you would have had to have done some homework. So that helps. Fine, do you want to integrate a new design in it? So those of you who've given a debit card, maybe you want a debit card with a biometric. Do you want a debit card with an account at opening? What has the industry moved to? So that assessment will help you analyze your costs and experiences to go forward. The other part of the policy perspective is you need to do dialogue with all your stakeholders when you do payments. Maybe there's a new system in place. Maybe there's a new regulation in place. So when we started off payments, in different countries, usually G2Ps is called government-to-person payments, which are the terminology used for cash transfers. They're the pioneers, which means that they start off electronic payments. And then the government adjusts itself because something that you all have to a huge advantage, South Asia and East Asia represents a large population of the world which is unbanked. And a lot of countries have signed the financial inclusion framework as part of the UNSG and other protocols. So you provide the key to financial inclusion because you have large beneficiary numbers. Tomorrow, if banks want in Myanmar, in Pakistan, in Uganda, which are the underserved countries, in Tanzania, to start opening bank accounts, nobody can provide them the access other than the cash transfer program because you have 1 million, 2 million, 3 million people. So you have a very important seat on the table. So financial sector will not look at you as the key implementing agency, but you have an important seat because of your outreach. How can you utilize payments through that seat? Is there a new system and regulation in place that you can work around for payments? Can you ask them to improve regulations to serve your clients? Because a cash transfer beneficiary always has an ID of some sort. You identify them and then you pay them, right? So what happened in some of our emergency cash transfer programs, we give them temporary IDs or we give them permanent IDs. So we negotiated with the banks, give them a limited mandate account, which is for 90 days or 100 days, because they're already providing an ID to you. So you need to do that discussion with the policy side. That's where it comes on. Then look at the supply side. The assessment will help you understand, is it only a formal bank you want to work with? Do you want to work with an agent? Do you want to work with a teleco operator? So this assessment will help you understand who and how to do dialogue with. First, who you need to do dialogue with. Is it the bank? Maybe you don't need the bank. Maybe you can use a teleco provider. And then how will you develop that business case for payments? Because unless you don't have those benchmarks of your payment costs, you don't know how many beneficiaries are rural, how many are urban, where are the hotspots, you can't negotiate on payments. So the first thing when you do payments negotiation, you need to have numbers and costs. And the assessment helps you for that. Now we're coming back, now that I've given everybody a bit of an overview of payments, why it's important, why the tool helps you to make an assessment, let's talk about the tool. Before we talk about the tool, I'd like to ask the audience if anybody has any questions on the payments assessment part, because I'm taking that as given now. Any questions on payments? Okay, that's good. So we'll go to the unpacking the payments tool. Either it's good or either everybody hasn't had coffee. So what does a payment tool look like? A payment tool, if you see this triangle, is driven from the ISPA payments tool is driven by the What Matters guidance note. So the guidance note is this nice long note, which is very comprehensive. And we've had a very, very experienced team develop it from different regions and the bank, as well as other development partners, which talks about all kinds of payment mechanisms. It's like the holy grail in telling you and a big dictionary on payments. You have any question, you will be able to find an answer. But you don't need to understand all of it, but that's your guiding thing. Then you have a data collection framework. So you need to develop your payments tool as part of that, you need to have a qualitative and a quantitative data collection framework. Qualitative is important because you also need to go talk to the beneficiaries to understand their views on payments. Maybe they have different views. Maybe they don't want to take money from an agent, women, who have a man sitting on the other side. Maybe they want some sort of access. They want some sort of anonymity. Then you have, the other part is the overview of findings. The findings that you get, you have a report on that. And finally, you have the country report. So it's a three-step process. Collect information, rank the information, and then put that information into a report. So the two aspects of the tool. What are the key elements of the financial and regulatory elements of the payments tool? So there are two elements of the regulatory and financial aspect. One, which you can see in orange, is agency rules for banks and non-banks. This is the rules section which you need to follow through to do a payments assessment. What are the rules that the banks give you for opening accounts, for transferring their money? And it needs to make a business case for them, by the way. So as you can see, the three icons is you need to sit with the banks, you need to do your calculation, and the money needs to make sense for them. Which is why a payments assessment helps, because unless you don't have a part of the numbers, you can't do that dialogue with the bank. And the bank needs to treat your beneficiary as a customer. If they don't do that, they won't give you the best service. And to make them treat you as a customer, you need to have costs. The other part of the regulation is the green table, which is the supporting framework. What is the ID requirement? What kind of account can you actually give? How many access points do you have that the banks have? Is there interoperability? Can you use another ID? If you have a national ID and you have an ID for the program, can you use a national ID? Can you make, the day before yesterday, we had a lot of questions on interoperability, in policy, in looking how you can work together with different policy landscapes. So this is where the payments tool helps. You can look at it and see, can we use some other framework to give payments? Is there a national ID that we can piggyback on? So this is where you can interspace with other programs. So this is the other important part, which is the beneficiary aspect. This is the part I love talking about, because I look at the beneficiary side. So from the beneficiary perspective, you have three areas that you need to look at: accessibility, robustness, and integration. Accessibility is very important for beneficiaries because it helps provide indicators on cost of access, the appropriateness, the rights and dignity. How do you pay them? It's important to pay them in a dignified manner because they do not want the cash to be considered a handout. So you need to give them a formal ID. You need to have a proper procedure to give cash out. The reliability of the cash out process, is it a biometrically driven? Is it driven by IDs? How are you verifying who's getting it? The final part is integration. So it's very important for SP systems to talk to each other. Who are you giving payment? Is another program giving payment to the same beneficiary? There should not be duplication. So the payments assessment helps you with that. So this is very intuitive. You open question 4. Can payments assessment only cover the social protection payments delivery system? So this is to check your last knowledge. Is it only about social protection, a payments assessment, or is it about something else as well? Can you all open your phones? And look at question 4. Yeah, so everybody's on track today. Either everybody's had lots of coffee or everybody's happy and it's going well. So yes, it's both. It's not just about beneficiary payments, it's about the financial landscape as well. So I think this is going to be a good morning session. I'm really lucky. It's going well, touch wood, till now. Everybody's getting it. So the 3 parts of accessibility when you come to beneficiaries. I've got a picture of the best beneficiary. She's holding her card, and that's to tell you that the beneficiary is at the center of your payments when you're looking at accessibility. Accessibility is all about giving it to them, and those are the Pikeha beneficiaries holding up their cards. So it's all about giving it to them in a dignified, appropriate, cost-effective manner. So all of this, and we'll go into details of each of these indicators in our next session. I'm going to skip this question because I think you guys are way better than I expected. Now we have the second part is on robustness. What is robustness in a payments delivery? It's reliability, it's governance, and it's security. Is your payments too reliable? So everybody wants to try out biometrics. Whenever I go to any meeting, they say, oh, we want to do the best state of the art. Does your infrastructure have the ability to deliver state of the art? Do you have governance frameworks to do biometrics? So we did a pilot for biometric payments in Nepal. And at that time, there was a POS-enabled biometric device. It was no issue in collecting and verifying it. But when you came back the next time, the previous biometrics never matched because they got a best state-of-the-art device, but they didn't have a state-of-the-art matching system. So these are things that you need to take into account. That's the reliability, the governance. Who's going to store biometrics? Who's going to store your account numbers? Who's going to store IDs? Does your country have a law against storing IDs? And then finally, the security and the flow of funds. I'd like you to answer this question, if you can open question 6. So this is something which holds down a lot of people when they do a payments assessment. The robustness criteria of the payments tool helps better understand the social protection payments in terms of the design and approach or in terms of beneficiary engagement. This is robustness. So look at it from a robustness perspective. So robustness, you need to understand, yeah, great. So it's quite easy working with you guys. So either it's like your threshold was much higher before I came, or it's amazing having you guys in your audience. Maybe one of you can volunteer for the next session as well with me. So it is a design and systems approach. While the accessibility part is all about beneficiary engagement, the robustness is design and systems. And you need to understand that you can't do that yourself. You will need a strong MIS person on board too. You will need a payments regulator on board too, because it needs to be robust. This is something that we're all still trying to understand, and it's evolving, and we have good country case studies where financial inclusion has actually taken place. So if you look at financial inclusion, which is the last part of the pillar, payment systems integration, it looks at 3 parts. Financial inclusion, coordination, and how you can actually help them save. Because the approach of a cash transfer is that you help them graduate, right? So if you're giving them an account, are you helping them, at least a part of them, graduate to something more productive? So that's a picture of a guy or anybody else thinking, okay, you're getting cash transfers. Can I use them to open a bank account? Can I do some saving with it? What kind of credit services are available? So that's where interoperability is required. Can you work with other PSPs? That's the last part, and we can discuss that in our clinic. So what are the international experiences? So this is some work that we did together with the ISPA on the payments inventory. And this is some of the international experience we have. In terms of accessibility, we have the Philippines program. They use an agent network to reduce costs. How can you reduce costs and appropriateness? If you have a large telco company, you have agents, maybe you can use those. The second part, robustness. That's the pilot in Nepal where the woman is doing a biometric to get a cash transfer. You don't have an ID, maybe you can use a biometric as an ID. So the payment assessment helps you improvise and work across platforms. The integration part, so yeah, this is something very exciting. So, and these are the leaders in the world in cash transfer. So there's Turkey, there's Mexico, there's Brazil, which give you a MasterCard for payments or Visa, which you can use at any ATM. And that's backed by a social registry. So you have that, and it's like a social security card. And I'm happy to talk about that in detail. So that's the state of the art, where you have an integration. So how does it support your stakeholders? Now, finally, this is the pilot in Tanzania. It helps in understanding your needs. It helps you understand how much you want to invest in the administrative capacity of your payment system. And finally, the most important part, it helps to see how you can integrate. Can you integrate your social registry with other payments for economies of scale? And remember, payments is all about how many more people you have. The more people you have, the cheaper it gets. So one other important principle is integration. This is some of the examples that we can talk about later. How can you build a case for a payments assessment to your team? So we've done we did a payments assessment, and we had a 50% reduction in service charges because we went back and saw how many beneficiaries can we deliver payments to in a more efficient manner. So from a 6.25 service charge, we ended up going to 3%. Because as the program expands, the number of beneficiaries expand. But nobody wants to go back to the bank after 2 years and renegotiate a contract. We like to do it every 5 years. So this kind of assessment helps you how you can do a better negotiation. This is the cost element. Yeah? So basically, when you're doing payments, the other important part of payments assessment is the negotiation with the banks. Another thing everybody asks me is, how do you make a service level contract to work with the bank? One is the delivery side, one is the service level agreement. The service level agreement consists of how would you select your payment service provider. And to do that, you need to do an assessment. You need to understand, are you going to do one payment service provider or two payment service providers? Is it going to be a master bank with different banks? Is it going to be biometric? What are the operational guidelines that you will make for the bank? So these are the elements of the payments. And as you can see in the triangle on the right, you have the scale of the program, the payment mechanism, the instrument, all these built into costs. And these are the different costs of different countries, which are dependent on your instrument. Sometimes a debit card is the cheapest if it's non-branded. If you do a Visa debit card, it might be more expensive, but then it has more access because you can go to any Visa payment outlet. So these are things you need to balance, and your payments assessment helps you balance that. These are some of the countries that we've worked with and we've seen, and there will be numbers for your cash transfer programs which may have increased over the years. But this is an example I wanted to talk about in terms of best practices. You have Brazil, you have Mexico. They have debit cards, which are backed with interoperability among systems. You have Indonesia and Pakistan looking at different payment options. You have financial inclusion strategies. You have a lot of support from the financial sector. But how can you utilize that for SP? Then you have Tanzania, which is trying to understand how a payments assessment, they have manual payments, can help move towards electronic. So these are the global experiences. So that's my last slide. Way forward and recommendations. After you've done a payments assessment, these are the questions you should be able to answer. Can you move towards e-payments? Is your system ready for it? Do you have a social registration information system that can help interoperability? The other part is identification of payment system gaps. Do you have security gaps? Do you have interoperable opportunities? Can you have better financial inclusion outcomes? Can you give a certain percentage of beneficiaries an account that they can use for maybe agricultural credit? In agriculture-based countries, you have small products for agriculture credit. Can you link them up? And the last part is on your outcomes of engagement and client engagement. Can you expand your SP policy framework using payments as a tool to integrate payments delivery across different programs? Can you integrate your payments with a disability payment? Because so these are things that help you answer questions. It's just one little entry door payments assessment, and that's something I was discussing last night with one of my colleagues, that it could be an ID assessment, it could be a payments assessment. That's an entry door to do a gap analysis for your SP program. Maybe payments is your entry door, maybe ID is your entry door. But it helps you do an assessment of the gaps and how you can use that to do more interoperability. And that's my last slide. So that's a picture from the pilot in Myanmar, where we looked at how you can, in an emergency, how can you quickly enroll beneficiaries. So that was payments all about. And in the clinic, we'll apply that. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask my next speaker to come up. Thanks.
Can I have a question?
Sure. Can I take questions, Anush? Later? Okay, sure. Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Luz, for introduction, and then good morning, selamat pagi. Good morning. My name is Isaku Endo. I'm a senior financial sector specialist, but my expertise is payment system and anti-money laundering. I started with my career doing anti-money laundering work and then moving to payment systems. So now both of them are very relevant, as you heard from the Juanita. Now I'd like to spend next 10 minutes to talk about next things, because I probably, because my focus is that what is the learning from the field test from Indonesia. And then I think presentation may not be so useful. So more, I want to talk to you, share our experiences, and then maybe we can discuss later. So now I think I'd like to convey 5 points. And one is that Juanita mentioned that this importance of having a financial expert. The reason is that we use the same term for different meanings. For example, payment systems. I always use this joke, but Chan and I, Chinese and then Japanese use the Chinese characters, right? And then we have this particular letter called the hand and paper. And if I ask Chan and give me hand paper for me to use, and then I expect actually a letter, something to write, and then he gives me toilet paper, right? So, we use the same word, but it has a different meanings. And this is a good opportunity for us to learn how the term payment systems is used in the social protection context, and also that the colleagues from social protection learn how the financial sector use this term. Because the ISPA tool involves wide array of stakeholders. That's my second point. Especially if you go to central bank or financial regulator, their mission or mandate is a financial stability, and then protecting controlling inflation and protecting the financial system. Financial inclusion agenda was added in the past, I would say, 5 years, but there's no core mandate. But the cross-section that we can deal with is linked with the financial inclusion, which is new to them, new to us, in this ISPA tool. So it's really a lot of, we need to seek the common ground to understand. So for us, when we use ISPA tool, we should be prepared to understand their language. You don't have to speak their language, but it's another whole set of another language. That's why I think our involvement was very useful. And then the third point is that this ISPA tool could see, as Juanita mentioned, is a whole set of value chain of the program to delivery. We understand that the whole set of the program side is whole deep issues, like a program, IMS, which I have no clue, and then payment systems. We have whole regulations, involve institutions, anti-money laundering, whole set of package. But we tend to focus on this whole deep issues, but not cut across. And ISPA tool allows us to look at this issue, right? Of course, and then I talk about later in some lessons. And then also, the ISPA tool, Indonesia was one of the countries for field test. And it was useful for us to look at the government payments, meaning that the government delivery to person, but also government collects payments. So this is another set of government payments, and we are working on the survey and then also landscape. It was a very useful information that we could get. And I talk about lessons. Lessons, initially, at that time, Indonesia has so many programs. They still have many programs. And we are ambitious to, let's look, out of 40, 50 programs, let's look at 2. Right? That was the PKH, Conditional Cash Transfer Program. Second one is the program Indonesia Pintar, which is education subsidy. Oh my goodness, that was too ambitious. And then we ended up spending so much time on PKH program. And then I think we did it was a good lesson because it was so, complexity was too much for us to handle it. And then also another point that I would like to mention is that we talk about financial inclusion. But I think the tool was developed based on experiences, a lot of experiences from Africa. But what's happening in Indonesia on financial inclusion is very different from Africa. So there's a hidden assumption on financial inclusion part, for example, use of mobile phones, mobile payments. Indonesia is not happening because that's a policy agenda of the central bank. We are not using mobile, right? So we are looking or we're doing diagnostic based on a mobile network, and you don't see it. It doesn't mean that Indonesia is lagging behind. Indonesia has a whole set of financial system that allows the financial institution to transfer money. So that's something that we learned. And then the contribution to the finalization of the tool, and then also the contribution to the World Bank program. So that was we met these 2 objectives. And then in the process, we met the government counterparts. I mentioned a whole set of government counterparts, development partners. Also, we had colleagues from GIZ, part of the team, which was very useful. Work sessions on questions and assessment matrix. Site visit, we visited, I think, near Solo, not far from here, to site visit. Then at that time, I'm sure that Ibu Susi could update us on this. But we had this 255 million, by now probably 260 million. And I think Ireland is 17,000 islands. I don't think islands expand 1,000 islands within 3 years. But the point is that Indonesia is the geographic challenge is real. It's many islands without financial access. And then, as I mentioned, this is just small tip of iceberg in the national program, but there are a whole set of regional programs. And then also we met different stakeholders from TNP Duaka, which is the national team on poverty alleviation, which has the data of the poor. And Bapenas is the planning ministries. Ministry of Social Affairs is the owner of the program. And Ministry of Education is in a region owns the program Pinta, this education program. Because the normal schools are regulated or governed by Ministry of Education, but the Ministry of Religion owns or governs this system of the religious schools. So that added complication. And then other ministries as well. Ministry of Finance has a regulation on how to deliver the payments, government payments as well. And then Juanita already mentioned about this. Now I just wanted to highlight one topic on this using application of the tool, which is a legal regulatory issue. Now, as I mentioned, that there are a wide array of financial or the regulators or the authorities which governs the payment systems by the central bank, financial institutions, is regulated by Financial Services Authority. When it comes to the government payments, Ministry of Finance has a regulation, Ministry of Social Affairs has its own rules and procedures. So it's whole ball game of to make social assistance payments happen. Now, bear with me that the maybe wrong use of social assistance payments, maybe I'm using wrong word. It's another example of different meanings of the same vocabulary. And then, so that's one. And then there are some contradictory regulations. So, for example, Ministry of Finance regulation allows, at that time, is the PTPOS and the banks. Then later on, it's changed in e-money, non-banks. But the other financial regulation doesn't allow, say, mobile telecoms to participate. So that's a regulatory unlevel playing field for the payments. And then that was the second point. And then different types of payments or payment instruments. And then at that time also we saw that the procurement process. So every year they have to procure or sign a contract for delivery, service delivery, which creates a lot of challenges for the participants because, okay, so I invest so much money in this program, then next year you don't know whether we can get the contract. So there's some hesitation, and that was the challenge. And in the end, at that time, was the post office was the strong contender. But it was not in line with later on that the government issued this presidential regulation on non-cash payments or using electronic payments, and then post office doesn't have tool to deliver electronic payments. And then findings, I'm not sure it's a whole set of findings, but I think I like to highlight that now it's the first one is that the appropriateness is that the lack of choice of payment delivery mechanism for beneficiaries. Now it's still the case. The government decide what payment mode that the beneficiary can take. Right? So ideally, you have your own account, and you can register your account to a certain system. And okay, so I have a bank account with A, and then I want to receive the money in this particular account. But if the system doesn't allow to do it, then for beneficiaries it's a kind of cumbersome. Okay, so now I have to open an account with bank B, and I use this for daily usage, but I have to go to another branch to take extra fee to get the money through bank A. Now, robustness at that time, for example, Indonesia Post, we looked at the Post system, and then they had their own internal system, but it's rely on manual operations. From payment financial sector point of view, when someone, a human being, is involved in this payment process, it's an operational risk. It's a risk. A risk means that there's someone losing money. So I'm sure that you have experiences frustrating sending money to another country, because at this point it's changing. But at this point, when you send your account to say to United States or somewhere else using SWIFT, whatever you type in internet banking or fill out the form at the bank branch, someone sitting in the back have to type in. And then someone types the information, there is always error. And then that was the point that human involvement of human beings. So from our point of view is let's make it electronic, straight through payments so that we can reduce the risk, operational risk. Now, and then integration. This is at that time, the second point is that now Indonesia has made a lot of efforts to establish coordination mechanisms, and it start working, and it's a part of the presidential mandate, and especially financial inclusion. They coordinate. This is good, because in this country, in my country too, or actually in our institution too, coordination is a luxury. So, but this is critically important because it involves different stakeholders. So as I mentioned already, this output or diagnostics and finding were used as an input to design a landscape study and survey, which we are finalizing together with the government of Indonesia. Also, the tool was finalized based on Indonesia case, so Tanzania, I think that's my understanding. And then also knowledge exchange and learning on ISPA to contribute better understanding of high-level, larger policy agendas, CCT, financial inclusion, and then in understanding what is happening in the social protection side from the financial sector point of view is critically important because typically this payment volume is enormous. So if the policymakers take advantage of this volume, you can improve whole payment systems or the country's payment system, payment infrastructure, but often it happens in the wrong order. So I think I think Juanita and I fully agree that this is an opportunity to improve the financial system, and this is an opportunity to engage those regulators, and then also get the feedback. And at the end of the day, country benefits, beneficiary benefits, and the whole system benefits. Benefits not only for the poverty reduction, but also the safety or stability of financial system and the integrity of financial system. Why I'm saying this? Because when financial crisis happens, the poor suffer the most. So when financial crisis happen, all the wipes all the assets, but the poor poverty rate increases, and then the rich get away from this crisis. Of course, they lose money, but they don't suffer from. They don't question whether they can live tomorrow, but the poor suffers. So this is critically important, and then that's why I'm stressing because of the importance, because often financial system, okay, they should work fine. It's not the case. So that's my point. Thank you.
So now it's the turn of Ibu Susi. Since the pilot in 2015, there have been a lot of changes in Indonesia in the delivery of social protection payments. And that's why we thought that it was important to give you an update of what's happening in Indonesia in terms of the delivery of social protection payments, particularly in the PKH program. So welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to wish you happy days in Yogyakarta. Hopefully you enjoy Jogja and enjoy the tasty food. There's no problem with your stomach with the food, hopefully. And again, I would like to you all accept our apology because actually my director should be here, but he's now with the president to check the payment activities in Banten, West Java. So in this moment, I would like to share our experience in transformation of social assistance distribution of PKH, Family Hope Program from cash to cashless, but please allow me to deliver it in Bahasa Indonesia, so you better use the equipment. To make me easier. Okay. It doesn't work. Okay, this is our program, Family Hope Program. Family Hope Program is the conditional social assistance program that distributed to the poor and vulnerable family that should be registered in the unified database of poverty alleviation program that is managed by our ministry in the Center for Data and Information. After the validation process, they are determined as the beneficiary's family. The purposes of the program, we have 5. Before, we only have 4. The number 5 is the new one. The first is to improve the living standard of, why do I do it in English then? Okay. Okay. Number one is to improve the living standards of the beneficiaries through access of education and then health and also social welfare. And the second is to reduce expenditure burdens and increase income for the poor. And then the third is the most important one for PKH, that is PKH should create behavioral changes and independency of beneficiaries in accessing health and education as well as the social welfare services. And in the long term, hopefully the PKH will reduce poverty and gaps. And then the last one, this is the new one, is to introduce benefits of formal financial products and services to beneficiaries' families. We have our legal basis, the law of social welfare, the law of handling spurs, and then the regulation of Ministry of Finance, and then the last, the newest regulation is the presidential regulation on distribution of cashless social assistance. Yes, this is our milestone and achievement of Family Hope Program. We have 4 kinds of category. The first is PKH regular. PKH is a Family Hope Program, PKH regular, and then PKH for the elderlies, and then PKH for disabilities, and the last one is PKH for remote areas. The number are moving so fast. In 2014, we have targets for 3 million. 2015, 3.5 million. 2016, moved to 6 million. And then last year, still 6 million. And then this year, we have 10 million as target. And next year, it will be 15 million of targets. That makes my heart beating so fast. Yes. And this is how the numbers of beneficiaries increases and also the budgets follows. I think the President already learned about the interagency social protection assessment, so that he asked all of us that all social assistance, number 2, and subsidies are to be transferred cashless by using banking system for an ease of monitoring, supervision, and reducing deviation, and all of the stuff. Why PKH transformation cashless distribution? It is the same like what the presenter before already mentioned. Improves efficiency, transparency, and accountability, and then improves financial inclusion, facilitates social assistance integration, and this is the legal basis. We have one card, what we call a combo card. All of the assistance are from the same card. The first is family, what we call family welfare card or Kartu Keluarga Sejahtera. Tomorrow you will see in Yogyakarta, in Kota Yogyakarta. And then there is a specific one for the disability. There is a symbol at the corner. And then also for the elderly, there is a symbol at the corner. This is not only the debit card, but also function as a saving feature, and also there is a e-wallet feature. This is the process. The first, there should be a registration or creating account, and then this is a big step for us, that it's still homework for education and socialization for the targets to use debit cards to get closer to the bank and so on. And then after that, the distribution of the cards, and then the distribution of the assistance, and then the target can take or withdraw the money, and then there will be a reconciliation, and the last one is monitoring. Because the number of the targets moving so fast, and then all of them should use cashless mechanism. So the banks in Indonesia should also expand the services. We have 4 banks that is There are Mandiri and then BNNI, BRI, and also BTN. There are those outlets. And we also have interoperability, technology that is a facility that makes cash withdrawal easier to the beneficiaries through the banks. And because in Indonesia we have remote areas targets, to respond this all, the banks launched innovative offline ADC also. This is what happened. In 2015, we still use PT POS. They do it manually. And then in 2016, we have two methods, cash and cashless. But in 2017, we do all of them cashless distribution. This is the impact. The impact of PKH cashless distribution towards number of saving account and agents. The number of saving accounts are increasing, and also the number of agents are increasing. This is how we learn about cashless payment. The first is because we just started in 2016, we still continuously building and improving the existing system. And then the access of formal financial services, there are still some remote areas that cannot be covered by banking facilities, so it requires more effort from banks to reach the beneficiary families. And still, because we're very large population, we still have low financial literacy from beneficiary family. They have still many problems about that. And then the distribution, as you know, like I have mentioned before, the target from the government is so high, but the bank readiness is still try to follow. And then the development plan right now is that we have the development of digital-based verification, and then the improvement of reporting mechanism through improvement of dashboard, and then the last one is the development of realization reporting system for digital-based social assistance. I think that's all, and tomorrow I hope that you can see the reality of the cashless mechanism from PKH. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Susi, and thank you to Juanita and Isaku. Now we can open the floor for questions. We have one here. Let's collect, say, 3 questions. Okay, Ibu Sri, Shell has a lot of questions. So,
thank you for all the presenter for excellent presentation and very informative. I have a question for the first presenter. Could you give us an example on what are the indicators to measure the criteria for the payment system, like in terms of accessibility, in terms of robustness and integration? And my second question to Ibu Susi. Ibu Susi, good morning, selamat pagi. How much is the reduction of cost from the transfer from the POS, PT POS, to the banking system, and how efficient is it in terms of the administrative cost? Thank you.
For the first 2 presenters, I'd like to ask regarding the payment assessment. Where does the role of the auditors come into the assessment? Because, so that's one problem. So I work on the Philippines, on the CCT program there, and that's one of the hurdles. So in terms of service delivery mechanisms for payment, there's a lot of options that are available, but actually it's the other side that's causing problems in the system. So I wonder how it comes into the payment system and what specific, let's say, findings we can get out of it and recommendations. And then if you had, the second question is if you had ever come into a problem like that besides the Philippines. I guess Isaku worked with us some time ago. So if you could give us some country examples and how you manage that concern. And then for the second presenter from Indonesia, it's very inspiring to see how quickly you're able to move from POS to cashless over a short period of time, because that's one of the struggles in the Philippines. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what are the enabling regulations, I don't know, enabling mechanisms for you to move quickly into cashless delivery, payment delivery, and what were the problems also that you encountered along the way?
When it comes to indicators, you asked about cost and of access, right? Accessibility. So we have this case study that we will be looking at in the second round, which has a lot of these indicators which we'll be discussing. So some of them on the top of my head is average payment collection time for beneficiary, how many beneficiaries per pay point, which shows you the amount of time they'll spend and the processing that will happen, the average travel time for beneficiaries to the nearest pay point, how many beneficiaries the pay point can process within 2 hours, and the downtime. So in financial sector, there is this lifetime as well. So when you swipe a card, what is the lifetime? And we have in one of our service level agreements, as in the case of Pakistan, because it's gone far ahead in payments, we've specified what is the time that the device needs to be live. Because what happens is that when beneficiaries don't get paid, the bank says, oh, the machine wasn't live. So it's a very good question. So that's a service delivery standard we set on that side. That 90% of the time your device needs to be live and the throughput time should be less than a minute. So that when you swipe it, you should be able to get it back in certain areas. So it's a very good question because it's not just about accessibility. It also tells you what you want to demand from your payment service provider. And the best answer they give is whenever there's a crowding in any payment kiosk, we get, it's because it's very political. The program is cash transfer, somebody importance district. It gets highlighted in the newspaper. And then you come back and say, oh, our device was down today, so it's an exception. So usually it's like, and what happens is in other cases, the ATM shuts down. If they don't have enough cash, they'll say the ATM doesn't have electricity. So these are so cost of access, I think it's a very, very good question, and I didn't cover that in the presentation. It's not also just about the beneficiaries, also the service that they're providing to the beneficiaries. The other question, which I think Isaku will handle more because he's got an excellent background and he just shared with us in money laundering plus financial sector on auditors, but I can give an example when it came to auditors for two countries that we have audit issues in every country, but the two countries I can talk about right now. So one, when it comes reconciliation, you have to see how you want to reconcile. So you have an electronic reconciliation mechanism, you have a manual one, you have paper-based. First, you need to make that process map of how and where and who's going to reconcile. So what happened in the case of Nepal and Pakistan, both Pakistan, is when it comes to IDs and payments, it's at the top in electronics, so that's one issue where it happened, and I'll explain it to you. So in Pakistan's case, the requirement was it'll be real-time live payments, so you'll be able to reconcile within 48 hours of the payment. Now, the reconciliation responsibility is of the Auditor General's office in Pakistan when it comes to overall payments. So there are three layers that you need to build. One is reconciliation at the payment and beneficiary level, where you will pay the beneficiary and the bank will say these many people have been paid. The second layer is where the banks, when they debit the accounts, the central bank tells you when they debited the account. So that is where the gap happens in cases like Pakistan, because the more they keep the money, the more money the banks make. So you need to make sure that the money goes out the day it's been promised. The last part is when it comes to the Auditor General, where they will tell you if they're following the procedures in place. So these three agreements need to be made at different levels for electronic payments. As in the case of Nepal, it was very simple. So the registry was not interoperable. It was a very basic manual identification system. So there was a difference in the list of payments that was being provided at the ministry level and at the union council level. So there were different people being paid. because their list wasn't being updated. So different people were getting money. So it became a very complicated audit issue. So one is an issue of cumulative numbers, which is the case of Nepal, that you have one number that goes out, but the person being paid is different. So on the face of it, the amount is the same, but people are different. In the case of Pakistan, it's the reconciliation issue. So there are different ways of looking at it. Isaku, do you want to?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. This is a very complicated issue, so where to start? So first is when the role of auditor, ISPA tool didn't look much dig deeper, but the question that we had, or we asked ourselves is, when ownership of money stops or transferred. So I think related to Aquanita's point that the government, so for us it was a bit shocking because the beneficiary received money, say receiving an account. That's the ownership already transferred, right? So then the question is, okay, so and then the social affairs and say DSWDs and others are worried about, okay, so what happens if the beneficiaries don't take out money, right? In a social protection side, or it's still government money, and then I think audit follows the line because that the rules and regulations are designed this way. But from financial sector point of view, money reaches someone's account. It's their money. You maybe made a mistake because the data is wrong, but don't go and take money. Because say, okay, so your employer gives money, okay, so this salary is $1,000, and then you receive somehow, you didn't use it. And they say, okay, since you don't use it, we take your money back. It doesn't make sense, right? And that also has a relationship with the role of auditor, because auditor follows these rules and regulations that you have. And that's something that we ask a question, and it's still pending. Another issue is that I mentioned that the length of procurement. And then procurement in the case of university, probably Ibu Susi can clarify, maybe I misunderstood at that time, and then follow through this the process, then the bank, currently Indonesia, the government is not paying any fees, right? So in the case of Philippines, my understanding from 3-4 years ago was DSWD pays a fee per payment, right? I understand that the Brazil case, the government pays a lump sum, which includes the principals and the administrative fee, right? What is the difference? Difference is that in the case of Philippines, if Land Bank doesn't do anything, right, they can still make a payment, right, from the government. It's because there are no incentives to be efficient. Okay, so I make a payment, I get say 10% or whatever percent. In the case of Brazil, I interpret it in a way that I get the lump sum. If the bank is efficient, I can keep more money. It's a profit for us. So there's incentives to do a good job, better job. Okay, so I want to deliver as fast as I can. If I make a mistake, it's a cost, so I want to make sure that the things are going smoothly, right? In the case of Indonesia, because we had the PT Pos, there's an arrangement, I think 7,000 rupiah per payment. Now we have the reforms, and the new system doesn't allow, cannot charge more than 7,000. So it's kind of, stuck. And in the end, new regulation is, okay, so we give a payment 30 days before. Bank can use it to cover the cost, right? So that's the challenges for auditor, because then the question is, what is the role of auditor? What is the rules? Because the banks, the social protection or agencies or the government are actually clients of they are using the services that the banks or financial institutions offer. The difference from the central bank or regulator is that they are regulator, they can tell what to do. But the most, they are actually, of course, each country has different political environment, but in the end, it's a customer. Right? So a customer using, then the question of procurement, audit, comes and it adds complication. I don't have answer, but I know this experience. And then that was one of the questions that I had in the Philippines as well.
Yes, thank you. Ibu Sri, terima kasih. I would like to answer it in bahasa. Biar nggak penasaran. Oke, Ibu, memang pada waktu kita menggunakan PT POS ada hal-hal yang harus kita berikan, yaitu ada fee, administratif fee yang harus Kemensos berikan untuk PT POS. Kemudian juga ada beberapa temuan di lapangan di mana pada saat PT POS mengeluarkan uangnya itu tertunda, maka di situ akan ada penambahan biaya yang dibebankan, sehingga pemindahan dari PT POS ke bank menjadi lebih baik, karena di bank kami tidak memberikan administratif fee-nya. Hanya memang kalau di bank tidak masalah, kami masih saat ini bermasalah dengan beneficiaries-nya, artinya untuk daerah-daerah yang remote areas kami masih mengalami kesulitan di mana beneficiary yang masih menanggung kesulitan mengambil uangnya itu. Dan sekarang memang bank sedang berusaha untuk mendekatkan pelayanannya kepada beneficiaries. Untuk yang dari Philippines, memang ini adalah sebuah perubahan yang sangat cepat dan mengejutkan kadang-kadang, tetapi ini memang merupakan strong commitment dari Presiden kami untuk memberlakukan cash to cashless. Artinya regulasinya disusun berdasarkan apa yang harus dicapai. Kemudian juga kami menggunakan hal-hal yang mempermudah proses. Misalnya kami menggunakan bank negara, yaitu bank state bank, sehingga itu mempermudah semua prosesnya karena bisa dikendalikan oleh pemerintah. Kemudian juga regulasi-regulasinya diatur sedemikian rupa supaya menyesuaikan. Contohnya pada saat di daerah-daerah remote area kami bekerja sama, yaitu perintah Presiden langsung juga bekerja sama bersama Telkom, Telecommunication Company of Indonesia, untuk menjangkau pelayanan di daerah-daerah remote area, karena sebelumnya itu tidak dilakukan. Dan lagi-lagi karena ini adalah strong komitmen dari pemerintah, maka saat ini semuanya berjalan terlihat begitu cepat, dan kami pun ikutan berlari lebih cepat. Demikian.
One here, another question.
Good morning. I have very short two questions. First question is who pays the transaction cost, either beneficiary or government of government? One question. Second question is if the beneficiaries not withdraw the cash in a certain time, what happen? Is this amount again returned to the government treasury, or what happened? That's all.
I have a question with regarding, this is a more practical in the how to actually make this payment provider actually compete for this J2P business, right? How do you actually design this scheme attractive to them, so that actually they're willing to invest? There actually is a issue regarding the business model cost, but also actually is this expanding to certain area itself actually is just for the J2P purpose is actually very difficult for them, given actually if their objective is profit, right? So this long-term financial service product is really not, it can give them any short-term gain, but then, they need to actually fulfill this payment, put down a lot of investment. So how do you design this scheme to make it attractive in terms of maybe the duration of the contract, or maybe actually really have them competing? So, or make them actually work together. For example, allow them to outsource some of the task to third parties, so they can cut costs on their side. What is the you see actually from other countries from all these countries you have studied actually seem actually give you a good approach to this. Allow the market innovation, allow actually the private incentive, profit incentive to actually come in.
Yeah. For the cash transfer, who pays the transaction cost? Either government or beneficiary. Who is the responsible for the transaction cost? My first question is. And another question is, if the beneficiary is not received, withdraw cash from the bank, what happened? Does it amount again return to the government treasury, or what happened? I would like to be clear about this issue.
So this is who pays the cost. The beneficiary is not supposed to pay the cost because the beneficiary gets maybe like 100 rupiah or whatever. Then that is supposed to go to the beneficiary directly. Whatever over and above comes, that's called leakage in the program, because that means that the cash transfer that was promised to the beneficiary is not getting that. So the cost of the delivery is built into the program. But what happens in practice is, which is why we push for electronic payments and reconciliation and automation, that's the example that was given by Indonesia, that there's a different cost at an ATM at a POS. These leakages happen with different technologies. So people and it's very common in the culture that I come from, if somebody has to wait 10 minutes in line, they will forfeit a bit of cost not to wait that 10 minutes. So if you want to go to an ATM machine which is clean, the guard in front will charge you some extra money. So this is what happens. And that's where the leakages happen. And that is why, while payment seems like a very technical exercise, it needs to be accompanied with a very strong social mobilization and communications campaign. Because you need to tell the beneficiaries that this is yours and you demand it. And that the payment instrument itself cannot do, but it has to be with in some countries, we've developed a financial inclusion and literacy campaign around this. Like Pakistan had a very strong financial inclusion and literacy campaign, which is a mother leader-led concept that the beneficiaries get to know what their rights are. The other part that you asked was that who receives if the cash doesn't get cashed out, what happens? So we have different experiences in different countries and different examples. The gold standard is that you need to have a decrediting policy. And Isaku can talk more about it because that's a financial sector that we've built into our. So sometimes you have a full service account, which means that once the money goes in, the bank cannot withdraw it in legal principles. Sometimes you have limited mandate accounts, which are for emergency cash transfers. Sometimes you have digital payment temporary accounts, which are for 30 days to make sure they get money. So it depends on the account that they get and the decredit policy around it. So if it's an emergency cash transfer, the objective is within the next 30 days, the beneficiary should withdraw it. And you do not want to cost your system in giving them a full service account. So after 30 days, the cash goes back. But then that's part of your communications campaign. Because you get a kiosk that goes into an emergency area or one-stop shop and distributes cash. So the communication campaign says you withdraw it in 15 days, otherwise you won't get it. But for a cash transfer program, which is continuous, you can't actually withdraw that cash because that's that monthly income of that beneficiary. But banks have started doing that because after like 6-7 months, when they realize that the beneficiary has not taken it out, they might take it back to the master account. And the lessons learned that we had was that you develop a decredit policy, that unless a communication doesn't go out, you don't track the beneficiary, either the beneficiary is dead or has dropped out of the program, you cannot withdraw the cash. Because that's the rule of banking, that once you put it in that person's name, you can't take it back. So I can share these different e-credit policies we have. We have one for different programs in Pakistan as well. There was one that we had in Kenya because it would go into a mobile phone, and then the mobile phone company would use it for credit for that person, mobile credit. Because that was their business. So we ended up making different kinds of decredit policies. So you have very interesting examples. And the financial sector is very innovative. So they'll find very innovative ways to get your money back. So you need to think like them when you make a decredit policy. Don't think like a banker or don't think like a beneficiary. The other part was, how do you make G2P competitive? So what we've done is, in different examples, is have the first most rational way is to work as a partnership and say, if you expand agents, you expand network. And that's how we'll work together. The more aggressive way of doing it is you create clusters. So you create an urban-rural cluster. So the person who has to support urban, where they're making money, will also support X% of rural. So you have, for the first cash transfer program that was launched in Pakistan after the earthquake, so we had earthquake across a valley, and some parts of that valley are very urban because it was a tourist destination, and some parts are very remote. And because we needed to get cash down as soon as possible, so we had a very aggressive cluster, one up north, one down center. So you make money down center because you have a flourishing business there, and it's a good thing, but you need to equalize that money by setting up a camp on top. So if it's very friction, you have a very aggressive strategy. But the nicer way of going about it is to do costing and say we will work as a partnership. And that's what we've done in Uganda, in Kenya, that we try to understand that cost of that agent. So if that agent needs to have 25 beneficiaries to make it sustainable, you create a cluster of 25 beneficiaries that would go to that agent, so that that agent just not gives financial services, but also becomes a mobilizer for the program. So that's the nicer partnership way of doing it. But you have both kind of standards. So when I spoke about my presentation, this part comes under service level agreements. How do you make competitive service level agreements? So there's different examples on it. Maybe Isaku can tell you the financial side. Yeah.
Yes, so I'll talk about the same thing, but from the financial sector point of view. So first, when you deliver payment services or any financial services, what you need is the infrastructure and services. So financial infrastructure, like the payment systems or banking system, and then payment services that allows the payments to be delivered. It's like a remote areas access to services, or you need to build a road and you deliver goods. Now, in the context of Indonesia, or especially this, with the islands, we may be asking the service provider to, you have to build a road and then deliver services, right? That's too much. Oh, I don't want to do it. Because you never know that. But if there's an infrastructure, there's a market, so that the service provider can go and then attract business, and then also at the same time deliver services. So in the financial sector, what we are saying is, okay, so to build the infrastructure, all the financial sector has to cooperate. Don't compete in to build a system, because you have this ATM system, 1 and 2 and 3, and then in the end they compete and the customers suffer because they cannot transfer this network to another network. So let's build cooperatively, and then you compete with the services. So if you deliver good services, you can get the customer. Now, putting this in the context of social protection, I think it relates to the Juanita's point. Then how they can allow, okay, so the government to support the central bank or the financial regulator, create an ecosystem together with the private sector to create this infrastructure and then compete to get the money, but also they deliver services. Because at the end of the day, what we don't want to happen is that, to see this happen is, this social payment delivery is a corporate social responsibility. I think this is the part of the thinking that I think some of the banks have. Okay, so we lose money because it's a CSR. But this is not sustainable. This is not sustainable from a financial system point of view, financial services point of view. So the costing is very important, being strategic, where they can get money, at the same time they can provide the services. And being part of this government program is actually an advantage, because they can also sell the names as well. But it's challenging because the countries like Indonesia, Philippines, with a lot of islands, it's really challenging. But I think Brazil did a good job. Philippines is doing a good job. Also, Indonesia is catching up because the number of agents now increased from a few 10,000s to 100,000s. So catching up. So that's the attractiveness. It's really being strategic, talk to stakeholders, what makes sense. But if the banks say, in some countries, the banks say, yes, we can do it. And the government asks them, can you do this? Although in reality, it's not really easy, but they say, oh, no, that's easy. If there's no honest dialogue, then in the end, program suffers.
Thank you, Isaku. Thank you, everyone, for participating in this session. Thank you to Ivo, Susi, Juanita, and Isaku for great 3 complementary presentations. Please help us rating the session in your apps and also helping us preparing questions for tomorrow field trip. Tomorrow you will visit some payment facilities. So you will have the chance to ask practical questions to the ones who actually deliver the payments in PKH. And now we are going to break for coffee. We will resume hopefully at 11. Okay, let's say 11:10 for the clinic. So where we will continue discussing the ISPA payments tool. Thank you so much. And